Welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. On this episode, we're going to discuss a central concept in nutrition, nutrient density. We're going to open up the conversation with the definition of nutrient density, why it matters in health and type 2 diabetes prevention, and dive into ways to improve nutrient density in the foods we eat every day. If you've ever thought, I'm eating less, so why don't I feel better? Or I'm trying so hard, but I still feel off, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. I'm Richie.
I'm Amber.
And Amber, today we're talking about nutrient density in foods.
We are.
So how about let's open up with just a kind of a definition of what nutrient density is.
Nutrient density refers to the amount of beneficial nutrients that are in food, like vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein, just what a food provides in relation to its energy equivalent. So its calorie content. So a nutrient-dense food delivers a high concentration of essential nutrients for relatively few calories. These foods help you meet your nutritional needs without having too many calories at the same time with that. So some key characteristics when discussing nutrient density are that it's really rich in vitamins and minerals, high in fiber and phytonutrients. Typically, they're minimally processed, not always, but typically, and they're low in added sugars, saturated fat, and refined grains. And that's in contrast, there are these things called empty calories.
Okay, so I've heard of empty calories before. I'm sure most of our audience has as well. Can you maybe get into or define a little bit better what empty calories are?
Yeah, they're foods that give you calories and that's it. Not a whole lot else. Maybe calories and calcium or calories and a little bit of carbohydrates and fat as well, but often not a lot of things that your body really needs to have energy and to feel its best. So these would be like soda, chips, pastries, sugar-laden coffees and teas. They fill your belly, spike your blood sugar. You have these like sugar crashes from it. And they really just still leave your body begging for nourishment. And I'm sure everyone can relate to having had a big milkshake that tasted great, but an hour later you're hungry again and you've consumed 1,600 calories, depending on the milkshake. And I want to bring up a stat if I can, because it's really incredible that nearly 40%, so for the average American, nearly 40% of total calories come from sugars and fats that are added. You didn't even let me finish the sentence. Sugars and fats that are added into food. So like almost half of what we eat isn't doing anything for us except contributing to things like type 2 diabetes and these metabolic diseases, heart disease.
40%?
Yes.
Of calories?
40%.
Are from added sugar and fat.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wasn't drinking anything because I probably would have spit it all over.
Especially like sweet tea or Coke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's incredible. So the fix is really to focus on this concept of nutrient density. That's why we're having this podcast today. Aren't you glad?
I am not glad. 40%?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just trying to quantify this a little.
If you think about it in terms of a bad day that you've ever had, or if I think about a bad day that I've had, I am, as I've said on this before, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm not a saint. I have had days that just were not good nutrition days. As anyone can think of a day that you've had that maybe weren't the best mental health days for you or weren't the best rest days. I do the same with nutrition, and it doesn't happen that often, but I have had a day where my supper was cookies. You know what I mean? I did pretty good at breakfast. I had a decent lunch, but a third of my calories for the day came from cookies. And then I wasn't hungry for supper because I was still a little hungry, but I was like, I'm not eating anything else because blah.
And the cookies basically have no nutrition other than the sugar and fat content.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I was exercising the next morning and I felt so tired and gross. And I was like, why do I feel so awful? I feel so depleted. Did I have a hard workout the day before? And then I remembered, I had cookies for dinner. Of course I feel this way. I had cookies for dinner.
I've mentioned this on previous podcasts. If you were a vehicle, you're running on the high octane stuff. You have disciplined your body over many years to be very sensitive to the stuff that's going into it. So I think cookies for dinner might affect you more than it would affect me or somebody that's not as attuned to that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Maybe.
Well, I mean, if I'm eating fast food most days, that probably is not going to, or at least I'm not going to be aware how much that affects me as much as it is. I appreciate the anecdotal story, but if what you're saying is true and not just a one-off evening where you didn't feel good after, but if normally in the course of a day, the average American of the calories that they're consuming, which just full disclosure is more calories than they need. Because
if you go to Burger King or McDonald's or something for at least one of your meals a day, that's pretty much where your 40% of added fat and added sugar.
So it's calories, but of those calories, almost no nutritional value whatsoever.
I think it's telling that in the United States, for kids especially, the number one vegetable is potatoes in the form of French fries. And the second is tomatoes in the form of, guess. I just want you to try to take a guess.
Ketchup.
I can't look at you. Yes, ketchup.
Which, by the way, has added sugar.
It's half sugar, half vinegar, half to a little bit of tomatoes. But yeah.
All right. So, again, that 40% that's a big number.
Yeah. Yep. So what's the fix? How do we get more nutrition into our food? And it's really about this focus on how many nutrients per calorie can we do, not per gram or per portion, but how much nutrition can you pack into each calorie? Okay. So if you think of like a donut versus a cup of beans, they're roughly the same or similar calorie content, but wildly different
that's a full cup of beans?
Yes, a full cup of beans, because a donut has a lot of calories in it.
The only reason I ask is I think it was actually the previous episode we talked about adding a half a cup of beans. I just wanted to make sure I'm up to speed on my metrics. If I'm comparing a donut to a cup of beans, I just want to make sure my numbers are correct.
Yeah, think about the differences of fiber between a cup of beans and a donut. Blows it out of the water. Pun totally intended.
I'm just doing this analysis in my head. I know I could knock down 2 donuts, no problem.
Oh yeah.
I'd have to think about 2 cups of beans. I'd have to be sitting down, and that's going to take some time. And
absolutely, you're going to chew it more.
That's going to be some work, and probably by about a cup and a half, I'm tired of beans, I think.
And think about your fullness level after eating 2 cups of beans versus a donut.
Yeah.
There's no comparison. Exactly. And you can also think of this concept of nutrition density, like putting gas in your car, but you skip everything else. You skip the oil change, the tire rotation, the brake fluid, the coolant. Your car that engine's going to blow up at some point. It's going to give out. And that's very much how your body is with that.
Much like American-made cars in the 1990s, I'm not going to make it past 100,000 miles. So I get it.
Yeah. So when you eat less, people it's important to know that your body still needs the same nutrition. So if you're a smaller female, you've got to do better with if you have gastric bypass surgery, you have less calories to get that same nutrition in. If you're on a GLP-1 and you're not hungry, you've got to eat impeccably well to get the nutrition in fewer calories. So it's your needs for vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein, those don't go down just because your hunger level did or just because your calories did. So like when you're deficient in fiber, vitamins, minerals like iron, your B vitamins, you could be at risk of your hair thinning. I've seen people have alopecia and their hair falls out. Now, it's not the only cause of alopecia, but nutrition can be a big cause of alopecia.
Does nutrient density of food or lack of nutrient density of food, does that affect your hunger cues?
Absolutely.
Because I'm thinking, again, you got me stuck on that donut example. Like, I know I could put away a healthy amount of donuts if I wanted to, but if my body's not recognizing that there's anything other than calories in there and it's still in need of those calories, if I'm an average American and 40% of what I'm putting in my mouth is not meeting that nutritional, like I'm assuming that my body has some kind of intuition to know what it needs.
I believe so, and I hope so.
And if I'm
no, I mean, it makes sense.
Enough.
Your body has to survive. Why would it not have different mechanisms to have you crave things that might be higher in certain nutrients, and cravings show up more in things like pregnancy? Because
I'm more asking if just the nutrient density of my food is less, is that going to result in me over consuming too many calories to try and get the nutrient level up to?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that's a big problem that does happen. Okay. Yes, you've eaten. You think I can't possibly be hungry. I just downed 1,600 calories, but there wasn't good nutrition in that. So your body is still, okay, I had that, but it still hasn't met the need. So you can think of lots of metaphors for that in life as well.
So I guess, let me try and again, I'm trying to explain it. Is there a tangible difference between I'm starving for calories and I'm starving for nutrients, or does my body just interpret it the same way? Is the response just put something in my mouth, regardless of which way it's going?
I'm sure there are studies that look at this. Offhand, I can't talk about behavioral studies in terms of this person was deficient in this, so this is the behavior that they had in terms of eating. I don't know, but it seems to me that if you are deficient, thirst is a natural response to dehydration. Sure. However, once you're thirsty, you're already very dehydrated. And I think that cravings are very similar. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that things like pica exist. People eating paint chips off of walls and trying to eat dirt. What they're deficient in there is iron. Yeah. And so maybe there's iron in dirt in some way. So the body's trying to get it. Like so with pica especially.
We don't experience that in the United States much. At least
not much, but actually I have seen it before.
Oh, really?
Believe it or not.
Okay.
It's pretty incredible that at least 2 people that I've come across have talked about craving paint chips and detergent and dirt and off things. But it shows up consistently in people. It's paint chips and dirt, and laundry detergent was a new one actually, but
that might have been a Tide Pod response.
No, this was before that weird Tide Pod craze thing. We're talking 15 plus years ago. But anyway, there are similarities with similar deficiencies in the body. So I think there's something there. Okay. I can't pull out a particular study off the top of my head, but yeah, I think it's a very informed question. It's good. Yeah. But I think when these cravings and dips in mood come up, I think it's important to understand that it's really not a lack of willpower and a lack of other things. It's if you're not giving yourself nutrient-rich foods, you're going to likely still be hungry. And nutrient density is just completely overlooked, if not purposefully left out in our society, in diet culture, if you will. Like, people are constantly told to eat less without being told that when you eat less, you actually need to eat better or more wisely. So I think of it like money as it relates to a budget. If you've got $3,000 a month that your take-home pay, and you've got that to live on, it'd really be best if your mortgage or your rent was not $1,800.
Yeah.
That would eat up a really huge chunk of that $3,000, and you'd have to be careful where your other went. And the recommendation would be that if you're having $3,000 come in, that maybe just $1,000 is your mortgage or your rent. So it's the same kind of thing. Like, where are you going to spend your calories to get the biggest bang for your buck? Okay. Does that make sense? Like, that analogy? I'm not always, we talked about last podcast, I'm not always the best, but sometimes I do okay.
Yeah. To me, I'm sure, like I've never heard pitched, here's your nutrient recommendations for the day, right? Like, or even if you just go to your nutrition label, period, like, you may find the little nutrient section down at the bottom, but it's in smaller font. It is not what's front and center on the nutrition labels. The nutrition labels is straight up calories up top. And then most of the time you get a breakdown. I see my fat, I see my carbohydrates. Sometimes they break carbohydrates down into sugars and dietary fiber and complex carbohydrates. They always
have it broken down, sugars and fibers under carb.
But that's the majority of the information on there. And then I may have some trace elements or something down in the bottom.
Yeah, the bigger things are the claims that they're sometimes allowed to make.
But I've never had like a prescriptive, which I mean, honestly, like I'm just now starting to do this based off of some of the stuff that we've talked about in the podcast, like a prescriptive, whatever you got to do, get X amount of fiber in your diet per day or that kind of stuff. Trying to meet nutrient goals. Now I'm thinking about it, like, even within diet culture, I get a Coke Zero. Coke Zero doesn't have any nutrient density from regular Coke. It's just no calories. It's not like there's any extra benefit to it. It's not, it's maybe benign, but it's not making anything better. I'm not getting any value from a nutritional standpoint from this beverage.
Yeah, I don't think people drink Coke Zero thinking that they're getting nutritional value from it. I think that at least that's a thought towards, at least if I have this, I'm not getting the 150 calories from sugar with this. So it seems like a step in the right direction. So I guess if you like, with regards to nutrition, to use that to try to tack on my budget example that I did earlier, like, if your calorie budget is 1,800, so you've got 1,800 calories a day, but then you blow 600 of that on Starbucks white chocolate mocha frappuccino, that's going to leave 1,200 calories for you to get all the fiber that you need in a day, all the protein, your iron, your B vitamins, your potassium.
Like protein's a macronutrient, though. So is that, are you considering, is protein under what you would call nutrient density, or is
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Especially your macronutrients. The thing is, though, it's easy to find carbs and fat in your macronutrients. And that's probably why protein has received so much attention lately, because if 40% of calories are coming from empty, then you would likely be you would need more protein in your diet. And when we talked about fiber really needing to be more in protein, people were not deficient. Just because people are not deficient in protein, it doesn't mean that they're meeting those optimal levels either. If you wanted more tips on how to spot a nutrient dense food? You could ask, is it colorful? Is it a whole food? Does it rot quickly? Does it have fiber naturally? Is it naturally grown or raised, like dark leafy greens, lentils, sweet potatoes, berries, nuts, those things? And even when people are eating enough calories, they can be walking around with these nutrition deficiencies, which cause very much to what we were speaking about earlier. You get this hidden hunger.
So, what are the most common deficiencies that you see in the people that you've worked with?
I would say people who tend to not pay attention to their nutrition as much. People who pay good attention and eat 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables and focus on whole grains and brown rice and quinoa and things like that. People who do more of a plant-based diet, this isn't as big of a deal. But I would say in general, magnesium for sure, because it supports just so many things, like over 300 enzymatic reactions are supported with magnesium. And those reactions can help regulate blood sugar, blood pressure, nerve function. Specifically, it helps calm the nervous system. And if it's low, it can manifest as muscle cramps, restless legs, poor sleep, insulin resistance, cravings for salt or chocolate. Back to the cravings questions that you asked. Kind of feeling like wired but tired. If you feel like, I'm so tired, I know I'm sleepy, but I can't fall asleep, that feeling. And we tend to be low because these are the foods high in magnesium are the ones that tend to be left off of low nutrient dense plates. Like their magnesium's high in beans, seeds, leafy greens, and whole grains. And also, good news, chocolate. So dark chocolate, especially because if you do milk chocolate, that's just a lot more sugar in milk than it is the flavonoids in the cocoa.
I've heard it said, if you like dark chocolate, you're a chocolate lover. If you like milk chocolate, you're a sugar lover. Is that,
that's a good one. Yeah.
I'm a sugar lover.
I like dark chocolate
very
chocolate. Much. I love it, actually. So another one would be potassium. This is crucial for blood pressure because it balances the intracellular fluid and sodium levels in the body. So it really pulls water into the cell, hydrates the cell, if you will. And it supports proper heart and kidney function, blood sugar, blood pressure. And low potassium looks like high blood pressure, muscle weakness, heart palpitations or skipping of heartbeats, fatigue, and sluggishness. And your high potassium foods would mostly be your fruits, especially the famed banana. It's also high in
sweet potatoes as well, right?
Yep, apricots, things like that. And vitamin D, nearly everyone is low in vitamin D, sad to say. It helps absorb calcium for strong bones and teeth, supports the immune system, plays a role in mood regulation and insulin sensitivity. And if your vitamin D levels are low, that can show up as brain fog, joint pain, frequent illness, seasonal depression maybe, insulin resistance that just will not, like you just can't overcome that resistance to insulin. And unfortunately, very few foods actually contain vitamin D unless it's fortified.
Yeah. I know from a lot of marketing when I was young, milk and dairy is a good source of vitamin D. Is that accurate?
Because it's fortified.
Okay.
Because it's fortified, which is really no different than taking a supplement somewhere. So we can make vitamin D, assuming you don't have kidney failure, because it's done in the kidney. So we mostly make it from sunlight. About 15 minutes on your arms and legs a day is adequate, but we're all more conscious of skin cancer and just the way that sun damage is on your skin. I've been guilty of being called a vampire because I have pretty fair skin and
a vamber, I believe. Yes.
I wear the vamber. I wear sunscreen, but We have more indoor jobs. And of course, if you've got more melanin in your skin, darker skin tone, it's going to be more resistant to processing vitamin D. Northern latitudes are definitely more challenging to get vitamin D. And for people with pre-diabetes, this is interesting, vitamin D supplementation. So you need at least 1,000 international units a day. It significantly reduced the incidence of type 2 diabetes by 10 to 13%.
Two questions.
Uh-huh.
I know it is vitamin D, you're not big on supplements, but is vitamin D supplementation something that you would actually recommend, particularly for people who are really focused on a more plant-based whole food diet?
I would recommend vitamin D supplement for almost everyone.
Okay.
Really,
and
especially if you're a good sunscreen wearer, if you work indoors.
And then follow-on question.
You're at a higher latitude.
I believe vitamin D falls up under the fat-soluble vitamins.
Yes. Good.
Is it possible to have too much vitamin D supplementation?
Yes. A, D, E, K. Those are your fat-soluble vitamins, and you can have too much. That's why there are some studies with vitamin A that actually showed it was more carcinogenic for smokers to take a vitamin A supplement, whereas eating carrots reduced their cancer risk. I think there's a lot to be said for getting those vitamins naturally where you can, but vitamin D is one of those that's just hard to get enough of in foods.
I know that there's a lot of, let's just call it variation and quality of supplements. Is there a particular brand or something that our listeners can look for to make sure that they're getting a quality vitamin D supplement?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that it's the international supplement verification, that whatever it says is in the supplement is actually in the supplement, because it is a very unregulated industry. And you want to make sure if they're telling you this is what's in it, that's what's in it. Otherwise, you're just throwing your money away. And so to continue with the common deficiencies, I would say iron is definitely a big one. This is essential for transporting oxygen through the blood, and it's needed for energy, focus, body temperature regulation. And low iron looks like chronic fatigue, quite pale skin, cold hands and feet, dizziness, and hair loss. So it's found especially in women, long distance runners, and children drinking who have too much milk in their diet. It's so interesting. I worked for WIC once upon a time, the Department of Women, Infants, and Children. So they run nutrition programs for lower incomes, lower socioeconomic status individuals. And I almost always knew what their iron lab would come back from doing a nutrition assessment. If they were drinking more than like 16 ounces of milk a day, they almost always came back with low iron levels, because it has to do with copper and the way it binds. And anyway, not another subject for another time. But
so what are some whole food plant-based sources of iron?
Beans. Beans are an incredible source of iron. Tofu, tempeh, things like soybeans.
Okay.
B12 is the other one. Keeps your nerves healthy, vital for DNA synthesis and red blood cell formation, supports mood and mental clarity. And deficiency might show up as the same sort of symptoms as neuropathy and diabetes, which is interesting. So numbness or tingling in the hands and feet, brain fog, depression, fatigue, a glossy red tongue. And it sounds really weird, but if you see photos of it, you'll, oh yeah, definitely glossy red tongue or mouth sores. And it's found almost exclusively in animal products and vegans. So you could, if you're a vegetarian who eats eggs and cheese, typically you would not be B12 deficient. But if you don't have any animal products, you could be deficient. People over 50 tend to be deficient because most of the time they have they produce less stomach acid, or they're on protein pump inhibitors like Nexium, Prilosec, Prevacid, Protonix, something like that. And that lower stomach acid decreases the absorption in the ileum where B12 is taken up. And up to 30% of long-term metformin users show reduced B12 absorption as well. So if you've been on metformin a long time.
So for our listeners that are on metformin, would you recommend B12 supplementation for them as well, or what?
Yeah, sure. About 1 in 10. So there's a 30% reduced absorption, but probably only a 10% are actually deficient in B12, 10% of metformin users. So 1 in 10 chance, I would probably take a B12 supplement.
Okay.
It doesn't really harm as long as you get it from a reputable source.
Okay.
And then fiber, which is not technically a nutrient, but definitely a huge deal for blood sugar and gut health, because it's really what feeds your gut bacteria. And we have billions of bacteria in our gut, and the better we feed them, the happier they are and the better they treat us and really improve that microbiome balance, reduces cholesterol, helps you feel full. If you want to know, get a refresher on that. That was the podcast from last week.
And speaking of, we didn't do it at the top of the episode, and I meant to.
Oh, avocados.
We have to do
Thank
a little
you for
bit
mentioning
of a
that.
reduction. We said that, specifically you said.
Oh, no. Wow.
I believe verbatim you said that avocados were in the fiber department. They're not.
I did not say
great.
I said they were a relatively decent, I think is what I said, when they're actually a really good source, not relatively decent.
Yeah.
You stinker. You're such a stinker. Oh my gosh.
You said.
Oh, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I do want to be as accurate as I can be. What's interesting about all these deficiencies that I just mentioned is that they don't cause huge alarm bells most of the time. It's not 5-alarm fire. It's subtle. It is this whisper of fatigue. It's this bit of sluggishness and poor sleep, or you're going to the fridge, you're staring in the pantry at nothing. And it's just these cravings that can feel uncontrollable.
You say this is the story of nutrient deficiency. This is the story of diabetes. It's never, it is a 20-year story that doesn't start with a big 5-alarm explosion or something like that, or it would get attention. But it is I progressively feel worse and worse until one time I go to the doctor and they're like, your blood sugar is high enough and your A1C is high enough that I can officially label you a diabetic. It's all tied to, if we wait for the
5-alarm fire.
Yeah. It's not too late, but you probably should have done something sooner.
Yeah.
There's plenty of opportunities to start turning this thing around well before a diagnosis of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
For those listening, if you're starting to let's just say not feel great, I'm starting to notice my sleep's deteriorate. I was like, all this kind of stuff. And you have a family history of diabetes, you might want to start acting like you do, because when when you start making these changes early, it just never gets to the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
You can really turn this thing around from a health standpoint just by making small but increasingly progressively better choices.
I think
what I eat and how I move.
Yeah. And remember that diet culture, like, not to pull a 180, but to get back to that a little bit, they've really done a number throughout decades in our society, and they have conditioned us to think in extremes. And so I think that's why we feel like we might need this 5-alarm fire to start to recognize stuff, because we're waiting on the extreme. And so if the extreme is the problem, then you need an extreme fix. And that's where diet culture comes to the rescue with these outrageous claims. Just cut your carbs, oust the fat, slash the calories, eat clean, keto, paleo. There's your answer. Do this one thing. When that is not the truth. That is not what, to be fair, sometimes those things absolutely work for people because they wake up. They pay attention. They've had the 5-alarm fire that makes them stop and think about what goes in their mouth. Or some people who I've seen, it was very few, but a few people that I've seen the carnivore type or Atkins type diet work for is I see a lot of people with diabetes. I see a lot of people with type 1 diabetes, and that autoimmune condition can also cause, or not cause, but you see some correlative diseases go along with it, like celiac sprue or gluten-sensitive enteropathy. They're the same thing. So some people with type 1 cannot tolerate wheat gluten. They can't do that. So if you had this extreme diet that cut all of it out, they're going to have benefits, but it's not because they did keto per se or carnivore. It's because they cut out an allergen that they had. And they think, oh, I did this. And then other people think because I did this and it worked for me, then it must work for everyone. And that's just not how nutrition works.
Right.
There are general principles and concepts that do work for everyone, but extreme diets work on the extremes. They don't work on everyone. And so back to the nutrition density piece of this. Imagine instead of this slashing and gashing, the focus was on adding in foods, which is just add stuff instead of always taking away and not having. And because the second you can't have something, like anybody who's ever on a diet, if you say, it's never, I'm starting the diet now. What is it? It's always, I'm starting the diet tomorrow. And
Monday's the start of the week. I'll do it then. Yeah.
I'll do it on this day. Yeah. But in the meantime, you eat like pure garbage to get it all in. And it, like the second you say you're going to diet, all of a sudden you crave something you haven't craved in weeks. Like you want to eat bad. And that's just, I don't know, we're just wired that way. The second we can't have something, all of a sudden we're thinking about what we can't have instead of all of the things that we do have. That's about how gratitude works. It's like all of the, oh no, I've got the first world problems. And the truth is like focus on all of the things you do have and what is working. And so nutrient density is more about inclusion than exclusion. So it's a question of how may I increase the nutrient density of this meal, or what nutrients can I get into this meal instead of how little can I eat and get away with it. And let me say this, that 250 calorie frozen meal with 1 to 2 grams of fiber and 800 to 1,200 milligrams of sodium, that is not a win. That is a low calorie, low nourishment trap. And we need to shift the question from what should I eat less of to how can I eat more of what fuels me.
Okay, so what does that look like?
I knew you were going to ask that. You're like, okay, I told you. No, I get what you're saying. I was prepared.
People listening to this have to be able to like, it's great that we talk about this stuff, but ideally, what could you do? What might that look like if I were, for example, replacing my donuts with a cup or two of beans?
Yes, that might make people really sad. But anyway, maybe I'll give, so I thought that you might ask this because I'm starting to become prepared with the curveballs that you give me. So I'm thinking of an example of 2 isocaloric days.
What is an isocaloric day? For our listener, of course, not me.
Because you knew what it was, right?
Absolutely. And I will let you define it.
Isocaloric just means let's control the calories being the same. Let's look at other stuff.
Okay.
So let's take 2 days, each of them 1,600 calories.
So 1,600 calories sounds like already, I'm putting diet in air quotes. This is for most people, if you told them that you wanted to be on a 1,600 calorie diet.
It's already restrictive. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Which is associated with, at least modest calorie restriction is associated with long-term weight loss. So we need to be aware of the amount of calories that we're consuming
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's think of this typical diet based on some low calorie diets I've seen people follow if they were going to restrict to 1,600 calories. So maybe like breakfast would be this 90 calorie, like Quaker chewy granola kind of bar. And then a lean cuisine for lunch, 100 calorie popcorn bag, and then dinner or supper, depending on what you call it, grilled chicken, rice, steamed broccoli, and then sugar-free pudding as a snack. So that would give you about, I even broke down the nutrition profile. Are you proud of me? So I'm proud of me.
You weren't kidding. You came prepared.
I did. I came prepared. So this would be about 56 grams of protein.
Okay.
And 12 grams of saturated fat, 1,300 milligrams of sodium, and 13 grams of fiber. So this would probably be 0.8 grams per kilogram for, I don't have a calculator with me, but this would be roughly 0.8 grams per kilogram for somebody about 100 and female that's like 125 pounds, something like that. And I did not do that math ahead of time, so I hope I'm at least in the ballpark. But then in contrast, if you look at a nutrient dense day with isocaloric, same amount of calories. For breakfast, steel cut oats with ground flax seeds, berries, and almond butter. And for lunch, lentil soup with a quinoa salad with kale and roasted veggies. For snack, Greek yogurt with chia seeds and some walnuts. Mm-hmm. And then for dinner or supper, a tofu stir fry with mixed veggies over brown rice. And then as a snack, apple slices with natural peanut butter or some almonds. And that would give you 66 grams of protein, which is about a gram per kilogram, 10 grams more than the diet before, 4 grams of saturated fat, which is 8 grams less saturated, which is that artery clogging fat that would increase the LDL cholesterol, which is used to be called the bad cholesterol. And then 738 milligrams of sodium, which is 562 milligrams less than the sodium before. 31 grams of fiber, which is 18 grams more fiber. So same calories, but radically different nutrients. The radically different impact that this would have on the blood sugar result, radically different impact on how full you would feel after eating this versus the other one. I got hungry just reading that last one. I was like, I'm still hungry. And the energy levels are going to be different with these. And this doesn't even look at the differences in phytonutrients.
Again, for our listeners, and certainly not me, could you bring us up to speed on phytonutrients again? Totally not for me. I've been paying attention the whole time.
I know. So phytonutrients are, if you think of it, they're responsible for the color of food, the smell, the taste, the flavor in fruits, veggies, herbs, spices, beans, teas, whole grains. They're the natural compounds in your colorful plant foods. So that's why we say eat the rainbow, because you want to get each color of a fruit or a veggie has a different phytonutrient that works on different areas of the body and can help protect your cells, fight inflammation, and reduce disease risk. So you've got the same calories, radically different nutrition in all of those. Yeah.
If I can make an observation, and this is, for some people, this may not be a very encouraging observation. Again, I'm a visual person. When I look at the list of ingredients on the first one versus the second one, almost everything on the first list comes in a box or in a package or in a plastic container. Yeah. And almost everything on the second one required some work to prepare it before I ate it.
Chobani, but
So the recommendation to get more nutrients in your diet is probably going to mean you're going to have to spend more time preparing the food that you eat.
Maybe in that second one, the roasted veggies, I actually put into you could use Calorie King or MyFitnessPal or Lose It, actually put it into the nutrient database as Green Giant frozen roasted veggies. So you could buy it packaged. You don't always have to cut all these vegetables up and prepare it. I think buying it fresh frozen is a great place to start. And then if you wanted to save money later, or you had extra time or wanted to try different ways, you could buy it fresh and cut it up.
Okay.
But there's nothing wrong with buying it fresh frozen.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, that's a great question.
I've always heard anecdotally to shop on the periphery of the grocery store and stay out of the middle. As far as just a good recommendation, just as good as don't eat white foods or any of the other things that you hear. But as it relates to what you're talking about, most of the whole foods or less processed foods are generally on the, at least from what I've seen, on the perimeter of the grocery store. And very often a lot of the box or very shelf-stable foods tend to be found in the middle.
I think that used to be a lot more than it is now.
Freezer section's in the middle too, so maybe that doesn't count so much.
Yeah, and I think now we've taken to Trader Joe's a lot, and maybe it is true with Aldi, but Trader Joe's, you gotta kind of get in the middle. Like, you get in there. Yeah, I think that's a decent guideline, but a better one would be to try to buy things fresh frozen. And people also say the closer it is to the ground, like how many steps between the ground and your table. Sometimes that's a good way to do.
All right. So to wrap it all up or bring it home, tie a bow on it, for our listeners, what's one thing that they can do this week to start having a more nutrient dense week, month, year, so forth?
Maybe I'll give 3 things and they can choose the one that works best for them or all of them.
Everybody likes choice.
I like choices. I like variety. I like choices. Sometimes I like just do this one thing. That's fine. But when it comes to food, I like variety.
Okay.
Add. So here's tip 1. Add, don't subtract. So add spinach, onions, bell peppers, tomatoes, garlic to your eggs. Add it in. Add beans to your salad. Use color. Find a place to add in color to your foods, especially as it pertains to like veggies and fruit. If you always just eat apples and bananas, try to find a fruit that's not red or yellow. Try to get an orange fruit, like an orange. Maybe go for something green. So just add more color in one at a time and eat food that rots.
Okay. I think you mentioned this earlier. Can you explain a little bit better what you mean by, you're not saying eat rotten food?
No, I am. Okay. That is a great distinction. I am not saying eat rotten food. I'm saying eat food that does rot eventually, but you don't buy it rotten. Yes. So think of it. If you we even switched our bread because we had a bread that expired, I think in 2 or 3 weeks. And then we found another bread that expired within the week. And it just felt like the bread that expired in a week made better sense for our family.
Because I think we found bread that had expired, or at least the label said had expired several weeks ago, and it was still looked fine.
No mold to be found. And if you ever made fresh bread, you know that's not the case at all.
I think the kids call it sus. I'm a little bit suspicious of particularly bread that is shelf stable that long. I know back in the Army days, the wheat snack bread component of the MRE was, even at that time, said to be like some kind of dietary miracle because of whatever they did to that bread, that it would not go bad forever. And my God, I must have consumed I don't know how much of that stuff, and it probably some better choices could be made.
Yeah, in the United States, our military spending and budget is number 1 in the world. And that's really where this shelf stability originated back in World War I and World War II, was just how can we get these foods more shelf stable for the troops? How can we do this? And amazing advances in food science are sometimes not as amazing as they seem at the onset.
Yeah.
You think, oh, wow, this is incredible. We can make this last for a year or 2 years. But the nutrition effects of having something so shelf stable for a year or 2 years weren't even in the picture of the realm of possibility at the time. Oh, what would happen if? I think that's why questions are so important in science and so important in nutrition, to think about like that. That can't be good for me. Like the fact that, like, I've seen that picture of the McDonald's burger that's been in the drawer for 2 years and there's no mold, no nothing on it. It looks the same, like new versus 2 years old. And that can't be good.
If your dogs don't get excited about it, you might want to question whether that's something I should be eating.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by eat food that rots. Don't eat rotten food. Eat food that has the potential within the next week or less to rot. Yes.
Okay. So all of this is great general recommendations. How does this nutrient density specifically tie into blood sugar?
So when your meals are built around nutrient-dense foods, fiber-rich veggies, legumes, lean proteins, healthy fats, then you create a steady, more predictable blood sugar curve. You feel full, you feel stable. Here's the big one. You stop chasing energy with caffeine and sugar. Oh my, if I just had 1/10 of 1% of the market of the Red Bulls of the world and Starbucks and the refrigerated coffees and energy Monster Energy. Right. My gosh, I would still do this podcast because I love it, but I'd have a whole lot more free time. Just saying, be going on more vacations and be in the water a lot more. It's incredible. It is incredible, the dollars that are spent on such things. And yes, you give your body what it needs to begin reversing insulin resistance, reducing medication dependence, and even moving toward remission when you really focus on adding in more nutrient-dense foods, because they will push out those less nutrient-dense foods. They will push out those empty calories because you won't be as hungry for junk. If half of your plate is non-starchy veggies, there's not a lot more room for junk on that plate.
I like, visual person. To me, the word that comes to mind is displacement. And the visual that comes to mind is if you want to think of your diet or your stomach, what I can put in as like a jar, and your less nutrient dense foods are the sand. If I'm not going to be able to get the nutrient dense rocks in there unless I put those in first. If I fill up that jar with the rocks first, the sand can get in there, but I'm not going to get near as much sand, and I know I've got the nutrients in there. I don't think it was as intentional, but you really got me on displacing donuts with beans.
That is not an easy feat, ladies and gentlemen.
If you told me I could have donuts anytime I want, and I can have as much as I want, but I got to eat 2 cups of beans first, I'd probably never eat a donut again in the rest of my life.
Never?
Truthfully, if the requirement to have, it's not that you can't have this. You can eat anything that you want, but fill up on nutrient-dense foods first.
Mm-hmm. That's what your mother always said, right? Eat your vegetables first. Eat your dinner first.
But seriously, like if I did that first, if I got, whatever my serving goal is for the good stuff, let's just call it that, the stuff that nobody's saying isn't good for you. If I filled up on the nutrient-dense food first, if not completely eliminating, certainly the desire to gorge on stuff that I know isn't going to make me feel good and I know isn't, air quotes, good for me or helping my blood sugar or any of that other kind of stuff, I may have a little bit, but I'm certainly not going to eat as much as I would otherwise. And then it's not, you can't eat this or you can never have that. Mm-hmm. It's just, I can't fill up on it. I'm already full. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I do this often. It is a strategy that I often use. Like if, as a parent of 3 kids, sometimes the energy level to make a nutritious meal just does not exist on some days. And the kids want mac and cheese. And so if they're having mac and cheese, I'm still fixing a ton of broccoli and a salad and some sauteed spinach maybe or something. And the kids might not eat much of their broccoli, but probably 75% of what I ate was broccoli and the rest was macaroni and cheese. And it helps the broccoli be completely more palatable. And I get the satisfaction of the macaroni and cheese without all of that saturated fat, salt that comes along with it. But I roast the broccoli, and roasted broccoli is delicious to me.
Okay. That was a lot.
You say that a lot.
It's always a lot. But I don't have diabetes, but every week, just in doing this exercise with you, I've been able to make positive change in my diet. Just applying the little bit of things that we talk about each week. Just anecdotally, the other day I went to the gym with my daughter, and they've got the blood pressure cuff in there, and so I just sit down and do the thing.
You mean you went to the gym with our daughter?
Well, this one's mine.
No.
we won't say who it is, but she is wonderful.
They're all wonderful, sir.
Yeah. In particular, if we mention her on the air, I'm going to hear about it. I'm going to hear about it later. So
as if they listen to the podcast.
I go to the gym with our daughter, and I do the blood pressure test. And then she immediately starts giving me grief because, oh, look, Dad, you're actually in the normal to healthy zone. Which she was making a joke of it, but I've never been in the normal to healthy zone in my life.
Not for lack of me trying to get you there.
And the only thing that I did to change it is just applying the stuff that we talk about every single week to what I'm actually doing in my diet. If it works for me and I'm already like at least somewhere close to normal, then imagine what these changes can do for somebody that is at the extremes of that bell curve.
Yeah.
Guys, this stuff works. And it works almost effortlessly if you just apply the lessons every single week.
Yeah.
So
it's truth. Love it.
All right. That was a lot. And,
you said that.
And we will talk to you again next week.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.
So here's your takeaway. The fewer calories you eat, the more wisely you need to spend them. Make every bite count. Fill up on the good stuff first. And if you're trying to make the shift towards eating for more nourishment, not just numbers, you're not alone. This is what we do at Empowered Diabetes. We make this practical. We make this doable. We make it tailored for you to feel good again. If you have specific questions on how to apply some of today's concepts in your life, email them to support@empowereddiabetes.com. We'll answer them on future podcasts. Until next time, take courage. You can do this, and we can help.